When I think back a year ago, I'd say the process was transformational. What it has added in quality to the time that we have now is irreplaceable. I didn't notice anything radical right away, which you explained was normal. I think it was over time that I just started to notice, how they say you never know when it's going to be the last time? I started to notice that, gosh, we haven't had this like storming off and slamming your door behavior that would come. I mean, that was frequent in our house, when she didn't like what you said or I told her to do something she didn't want to do. It was just straight to her room and slam the door. Sometimes throwing things in her room. I could hear screaming sometimes. And it was like all of a sudden I realized, gosh, when's the last time she responded that way? And it was slow. And she also suffers from pretty severe anxiety and has had a lot of gut issues and illness and missing school. And so she did miss several sessions. So that's why it took so long to get those 40 in. I noticed very slowly that nothing huge had changed, but the big behaviors were getting quieter. I could still see the responses. She was also slowing her thoughts and her responses like in the moment. Not always, but I noticed that she sometimes would remember to take a beat. So, yeah, I guess when I think back a year ago, I'd say the process was transformational, even though throughout the process, I really wasn't noticing a lot. Does that make sense?
It does. We think of neurofeedback as a learning paradigm. And if you're learning something, I often use the example of a musical instrument. So if you're learning to play the guitar, like at what point do you say, I've learned to play the guitar? Like every lesson you've learned some piece of a skill, and then you keep putting those little bits of skill together. And then pretty soon you can do something like you can make your way through a scale. Well, can you play a guitar yet? Well, not really, but you can do more than you used to, right? And that's this is the exact same process. We help the brain, lay down new neural pathways, and that takes some time to develop those neural pathways. But then that brain still needs to decide, use the old pathway or use this new pathway. And in the beginning, it tends to go out of momentum, uses the old one, but eventually it'll try the new one. It goes, oh, actually doing this new pathway, the results were better. My life went better this way. So then it'll use it again and again. And then maybe one time it goes down the other pathway. And then it's like, yeah, no, actually turns out that isn't actually as good as this other pathway. But one of the things that you had mentioned, we had talked about clinically, but you mentioned here, is how things were kind of unfolding at school and for her with her friends.
That's a good question. So I would say in the spring when she started, school and friendships at school were pretty hard for her. And she still struggles, but she really would read situations wrong and she would react to what she saw and what she thought was happening. Not be able to really connect with her classmates. What I noticed is when she started school again in September, she was making conversation with friends. She was sitting at a table with people at lunch where she used to sit alone. So part of that was, I think, just maturity. But I definitely think that part of it was feeling more confident in her ability to make those connections and kind of taking a chance that the work that she was doing was going to support that. So she did. She took a chance sitting with a group of people at lunch and making conversation. And she would come home and say, yeah, I talked to so and so and I sat with the group at lunchtime and we talked, and she'd sit with her volleyball team and just connected with them. That I was a coach for volleyball, so I could see those connections in practice too. That was another place where she really struggled last year, especially if something was hard and she wasn't being successful right away, would set her off and she'd miss the whole rest of the practice. And that still happened, but it happened far less frequently this fall than in last year. What I would add to somebody, to like advice or experience, sharing experience, I know I've heard people talk about, how much time this takes, and it does. It's a commitment. It's a time commitment for sure. And I was blessed to be, it happened at a time when I could make it happen and get her there most of the times, or get help to get her there. And I would say to anyone who would use that as a reason not to do it, I would say it did take time away from other things, but what it has added in quality to the time that we have now is irreplaceable. I mean, and we'll go back. I mean, we're gonna continue and start up again soon because I think there's more work to be done. And I think she can continue to benefit. It was recommended by the clinic that did her last, an updated neuropsych. They said absolutely continue that because it's shown to be working. But I would say to anyone who says, it's just so much time, it's worth it because it's an investment of time in a quality of, their well-being